Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to today's session. My name is Dale Moffett. I'm from Specialty Care. I will be your moderator today to make sure the session keeps moving. And I'm also one of the speakers, so I'll do my bio when I do the rest of them. So thank you very much. I'm going to do a brief introduction of our speakers and then how it's going to flow. Each presenter will do a 20-minute presentation, and then we'll have questions at the very end. Okay, so if you want to stay for questions or you have a question for a specific speaker, we'll save those to the end. So our first speaker is Leslie Macadam, and she's from the Canadian Centre for Activity of Aging, CCAA, for those who know the acronyms. And she is a program specialist, a graduate of the University of Western Ontario, holds a Bachelor of Arts in Kinesiology, and is a member of the Canadian Centre for Activity of Aging since 2004. She is a certified kinesiologist and is currently program specialist at the CCAA. Who wrote this? No, just kidding. Primary duties are training, physical activity leadership courses, overseeing trainers, promoting the leadership courses, as well as teaching kinesiology courses at Western. She has a variety of aging, activity, and health-related conferences, including Shoppers Home Healthcare, and presented there, as well as the Therapeutic Recreation Ontario Annual Conference. Wow. So we're pleased to hear her speak on restorative care. We also have Christine Macdonald from CARF International. She has had a varied career in the healthcare industry as an occupational therapist, and after graduating from the University of Southern California, while still in California, she became an administrator of a full continuum of care. She came to CARF in 1991 and serves as the Managing Director of Medical Rehabilitation and Aging Services during her time there. Chris has represented CARF at international, national, regional, and local meetings to promote and interpret standards and the use of accreditation as a quality, business, and clinical strategy throughout the continuum of care. The third speaker is myself. I'm Dale Moffett. I am the Director of Quality and Management Consulting with Specialty Care. I have a background in long-term care for 20 years. So I was a Director of Nursing. I have been a frontline staff, and I do work with our consulting team on restorative care, on the development of the program, MDS, etc. I'll be presenting on what is the current situation in Ontario with a special task force that has been developed with a variety of different groups in order to look at what's happening in the future with nursing, rehab, special care, and MDS specifically. So I'd like to welcome our speakers, and our first speaker is Leslie. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Leslie Macadam, and I work at the Canadian Centre for Activity and Aging, and that's in London, Ontario. So I am not related to Rachel McAdams, the actress. We're from the same city. We're not related. So I'm representing the Canadian Centre for Activity and Aging today. And as many of you know, we promote the philosophy of restorative care, and we've been doing so since 1996. And our researchers look at the resident and functional outcomes. So that's why we're a panel. So Dale will be talking more about specific Ontario information, and I'll be talking in general about restorative care and some nice updates. So as mentioned, I'm part of the University of Western Ontario, which we're changing to Western University, in case you wonder why the logo is different. Our mission is to develop, encourage, and promote an active, healthy lifestyle for Canadian adults that will enhance the dignity of the aging process. So show of hands if that's everyone's mission. Pretty much, right? We're all on the same page. We're all working together. That's great. We do have a mandate where we investigate the interrelationship of physical activity and aging and promote and develop strategies related to that. So today we'll be looking at the frail. group that we deal with. We do older adult also. We also do homebound, adult day program, and so forth, but we'll focus on long-term care today. We do research, evaluation, knowledge translation, etc., and that's all on our website. So restorative care, we're going to focus on the residents who are deconditioned, and the Canadian Centre for Activity and Aging still promotes that you do restorative care coupling with existing programs, so still doing restorative care items throughout. So even with bingo, can they transfer from a chair when they go there? Can they reach for their own bingo cards, right? So that you're still promoting throughout the restorative care philosophy in every program that's done. Of course, there are many benefits for the resident related to restorative care, predominantly in functional outcomes and functional gains. Hopefully that their independence will increase, but also just overall self-esteem, right, does increase with restorative care. But there are benefits to the staff, so let your team members know that it is proven that the efficiency improves when restorative care is implemented in the home. Also, the relationship between staff and residents is actually better because we're striving toward a goal for that resident related to quality of life. The restorative care team, you're the ones bridging the gap, so we strongly encourage to work with other therapies, other organizations that come into the home and share information. Of course, as long as it's the appropriate information. So we're going to look at deconditioned. What is deconditioned? That's a frail person. Someone who's frail has an overall decrease in functional mobility and therefore have an increase in their dependence level, right? Functional mobility has 8 components. Does anyone remember what they were? Strength, balance, flexibility, coordination, cardiovascular endurance, muscular endurance. Is sounding familiar? Body composition. Good, good. So those are the 8 main conditions, or main components. And if you are frail, those have a decrease. So show of hands, are you working with people with decreased strength, decreased balance, decreased flexibility? Good. So one of the solutions, it's not the only solution, but definitely restorative care and exercise intervention. So what does the research say? So we're going back to a landmark study that the Canadian Centre for Activity and Aging did where we took residents and we divided them up into groups. All right, so over here on this side of the room, you're doing strength, balance, and flexibility exercises for 4 months. And over here, this side of the room, you're doing range of motion exercises for 4 months. All right, show of hands if you think over 4 months you improved. Some of you who maintained. All right, some maintained. Declined. Did anyone decline? And unfortunately, those who were on the range of motion group, they did show decline in their functional abilities, and the other side, strength, balance, and flexibility, showed improvement. So good work over here. Sorry, over here, not so good, right? But that's showing to us that we've got to up the ante. That range of motion is a good starting point with the residents, but we've got to progress to strength, balance, and flexibility to see a functional gain, because that's what we're looking for, right? Improvement in their function. Also with that study, it's showing that one size does not fit all, and that we need to individualize our programs, which we're getting better and better at. And again, range of motion is a good starting point, but you can't stay on range of motion forever. In 4 months, they declined. Right? So we need to progress into more difficult and challenging programs such as strength. Of course, goal orientation is very important, and we have to keep our questions till the end. So keeping goal oriented, right? Instead of send them over to Dale here and she'll fill their time, right? We don't want to do that anymore. We're looking at the goals. So the proof is in the pudding. 2001, 82 long-term care facilities in 9 provinces were doing restorative care programming. It's not very many. And of course now in Ontario we have over 630 doing the programs. So looking at frailty indicators, those with muscle weakness, subjective fatigue, reduction in physical activity, they have a slow gait speed, which is very slow. It's under 1 meter per second. And looking at weight loss. So the clients that were on programs, they showed that exercise was the only intervention that consistently improved their decrease in their muscle, their physical function, and even their mood and cognitive changes. Now, of course, there's other interventions, but consistently exercise was showing improvement. So looking at a summary of exercise interventions that were done with frail long-term care clients, we're looking at a total of 16 different exercise interventions, and some were done 3 times a week, 2 times a week, some were done 5 times a week, and then the duration varied. So we're looking at 16 weeks to 24 weeks. The lowest was 4 weeks. But in those time frames, all of these studies were able to show gains in strength, balance, and flexibility, and the ones that were walking did show improvement in walking speed. So a systematic review study looking at over 300 studies showed that 3 times per week improved function, and for those programs that were longer than 5 months. So I know that we're doing more than 3 times per week with our residents, which is good, but sometimes maybe not up to that 5 months. So thinking outside the box, can there be follow-through programming with other departments perhaps, or family members, or right? That's what we do in restorative care. We think outside the box. In different studies in the systematic review with hospital, home care, and long-term care. Long-term care, we did better in the outcomes that the residents had because we're there and we're providing encouragement. Now, out of 47 programs, which looked at 4,915 residents, it showed that multi-component training, so the content that's in your restorative program, should be multi-component, lasting more than 3 months and 35 to 45 minutes in length. So multi-component meaning strength, balance, flexibility, and the 4th one being cardiorespiratory endurance. So there is a debate going on about flexibility. Some of you may have heard in the new guidelines came out for everyone, even yourselves, adults and older adults. They didn't mention that you should be doing stretching on a regular basis. So what that's saying is stretching is beneficial if it's in a rehab setting. So for us to be doing the 15 to 20 second hold stretches with our residents, it's not as beneficial. So you can do range of motion, but potentially stretching is not as beneficial. It would be better to do strength instead. It would be better to do balance instead, and leave the stretching to your physio team where they do longer stretches and more specific stretches. Oops. So the frequency of restorative care, of course, every day is good, but there's also research on the phrasing of how you say it to the resident. So if we're always saying, do this every day, it's safe to do this every day, and it is, then the outcome's going to be greater. But if we say, only do this 4 times a week, what's going to happen? You'll be lucky if they do it once, right? So we're promoting every day it's safe. You're doing strengthening exercises that are functional. You're doing walking, which you can do every day. You're doing movements, getting dressed. Those are all things you can do every day. And the phrasing, the way we say it to the resident and promote them every day is also important. So come up with some nifty ways to say, yeah, every day is great and greatest of all and that type of thing, so that we're promoting that they can do it and it's not a fear that they're going to get injured. Now, for those who are fairly new to restorative care or need some tips, need a refresher, there are guidelines out there that were comprised by the Seniors Health Research Transfer Network, which anyone can become a member of, even yourselves. And it's just a quick little guideline called ACTIVE, and it's promoting that in your restorative programs and physical activity programs in a care setting, you would do an assessment, care plan, you'd have team commitment, you do the implementation of starting point, strength, balance, and flexibility, progressing to cardiovascular endurance, and then a verified approach, so that potentially be using a goal attainment scale, and then evaluating your outcomes. So that document, I have some at the back, and of course they're online, and they break it down and give you more and more tips if you're having issues, and even with team commitment and team building, which is important for all of us. So there's just a sample of the document. And so I'm going to move on to falls prevention, which is also a very important part that we're looking at. So So what we're looking at here is a falls prevention program. It's recommended that you identify the residents at risk so that even if you're a brand new staff or you work there casually, that they know what the symbols mean and who's the ones who are at risk. If they're a falls risk client, resident, we would be actually doing a functional assessment also, not just finding out about their medications, their history, that type of thing, which is still important, but also finding out what's their actual functional capability. Can they stand? Are they standing? Can they walk? And then providing appropriate intervention. Now, it's not always exercise or balancing, that type of thing. Sometimes it is other interventions, so trying to find the appropriate one. An overall goal for any, hopefully, falls prevention program is to minimize the risk of falling without compromising the mobility of the resident, right? So we're not decreasing their mobility by potentially having them sit. We're finding another intervention that would keep their same mobility. So here are some tips of what to put in a restorative program if you're trying to target more falls prevention. All right, so daily is important to do some sort of activity movement daily, that if the client can weight bear it, you're weight bearing. So that goes for any program. If the client can stand, the resident can stand, they should be standing. If they can walk, they should be walking. Practicing unipedal standing, so that's actually standing on one foot. And it's recommended to do that 1 minute 3 times a day. So that could be part of the program. So of course you do both sides, not just one side. And that's increasing their strength and balance in one leg, because when you do walk, you are standing on one leg for a brief period. And as your walking decreases and you get slower and less sure, you actually stand on 2 feet longer. So they're doing the double stance time longer, and then they have more time to shuffle, more time to drag their feet, more time to trip. Include resistance training, especially for the lower body, and strengthening the 4 and then the 5th major muscle of the lower body. So what are the major 4 muscles of the lower body? Quads, good. Hamstring, glute, and calf. And then to improve walking quality, you also want to do the front of the shin, the tibialis anterior. I heard someone say it. Good work. So those are definitely, you want to strengthen those. And how many repetitions should you do if you're doing a strengthening? What's the recommendation? Yeah, around 8 to 12 times if you're looking at strength. Good. So performing balancing activities, of course, in the balancing segment. So doing static, dynamic, and functional balance. Stepping in time to music has also shown in many studies that it can help reduce falls. And the best music is actually piano music. So crack out the tunes and start just marching to the music. And that is something that's rhythmical, and rhythmic is also good for certain conditions, and one of those would be Parkinson's and MS, right, the rhythmical movements, right, so in time to piano music, but you could use other music. Range of motion and stretching, but more to improve reaction time, right, so doing 1, 2, 3, but then slow and then fast, right, so you're doing different coordinated movements to different times. Looking at dual tasks and then progressing to doing that walking. If the client, of course, is walking, that's appropriate, right? So think about when the resident falls, what are they doing? They're leaning over and looking in their purse, and they get distracted by the TV, so they're not able to do 2 tasks at the same time, right? So doing a dual task thing, maybe even progressing to walking like holding a cup, right? Because that's what they do, right? They'll go up and get their coffee or their water and then walk, right? So you have to be able to walk holding something, so progressing that way. So you're not just doing basic walking, you're doing it walking and turning your head, walking and talking. Even walking and chewing gum is hard for some people, so doing the dual task. Then looking at dynamic activities, so similar to balancing but mimicking everyday things. So raise your hands if you put on your pants this morning without sitting down. Right? All of you have great balance, right? You don't realize how great your balance actually is, right? That's a very difficult task to do. So can we mimic that type of movement? I have seen it done with a hula hoop, but that would be more advanced, right? Step into the hula hoop, pull it up, take it down, right? So working on mimicking everyday things that require balance. Is the resident reaching at any point? Some of them have to reach in their closet, right, to get something. Sometimes it's at their level, right? So those mimicking those type of things that are also challenging in balance. So we talked a lot about the functional gains. I gave you some examples of different programs over different time frames. As long as you're being consistent and you're working at the level that's challenging the resident, you can see functional gains. But in terms of looking at benefits, health benefits, especially related to cardiovascular conditioning, right? Unfortunately, strength, balance, and flexibility isn't quite good enough. You do have to do cardiovascular exercise, aerobic exercise, right? Even for an older adult, to see improvement, we've got to work in the moderate range. And the new guidelines that came out, they are for the apparently healthy 65-plus person, right? But that you still would need to work in a moderate level cardiovascular training to see a health benefit related to the heart. And that goes actually for everyone in here, that it's the same guideline, 18 and over actually. So 150 minutes per week, which is 2.5 hours per week of moderate to vigorous. So tonight, everyone's going to walk for half an hour, right, at a moderate to vigorous pace. And if you can promote residents who are able to get to that level, they can see a change and less risk of getting a cardiovascular condition. And the risk, even for yourselves, you're decreasing your risk by 30 to 60%. Now, that's not if you do it just once tonight. You have to do it consistently on a regular basis, on a weekly basis, right? But also 25 chronic conditions are also related to coronary health, right? Cardiovascular health. So adding in more moderate paced walking for the resident can also help decrease those chronic conditions. And one of them is even osteoporosis. Another is stroke. Depression and anxiety also falls in that list, right? So residents who are already kind of doing quite well with the restorative program, could they be pushed a little bit further to progress? So that's a quick update information. I've also provided information at the back, and of course will be available for questions after the other speakers come up. So thank you.
I'll make you stand on one leg while we're doing this. Can you stand on one leg?
No.
Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to this session, and I'd like to thank the conference organizers and Christie Gardens who sponsored this session. Christie Gardens is accredited by us, so that's a nice treat for me to have them sponsor this. So let's talk a little bit about a new day of taking a look at how many of you would say that you have a rehabilitation program. Anybody have a rehab program? Raise your hands up. How many of you have therapy services? How many of you have a restorative program? How many of you have an activity program? Okay, some of you didn't raise your hand, so I don't know why you're here, but hopefully you'll enjoy this. Okay, so one of the things that I'm going to do is kind of an overview and get you to start thinking about those 4 things that I just mentioned to you and how you define those. Because coming from across the border, and it's always a treat to come up to the Great White North and be able to spend time up here, but there is some confusion, I think, between the terminology of rehabilitation, therapy services, restorative, and activity programs. And we want to make sure that you're starting to take a look at those and start to define those. I wanted to do some environmental scanning with you and for you to begin to think about your environmental scan and what's changing in your environment. There has been a lot of different payment and models of care that have been developed, and there tends to be, at least in our country, a decreasing reimbursement and a move to have more services delivered in less expensive settings. And, you know, any organization is an expensive setting, so there's a lot of emphasis on home and community services and getting people out of nursing homes into the community with supports. Consumers, a different group of consumers than 10, 15 years ago. You've got well-educated consumers, consumers who are looking for choice, consumers who are asking more difficult questions, and they're looking for value-based purchasing. Whether that's public or private funding, people want to know there's value, and value is defined as quality over cost. And so being able to talk about your performance, your results with your residents is going to be critical. And then there is a push to have more integrated continuums, that people enter into a system and they keep within that system. They don't leave it, whether it's getting primary care, whether it's emergency services, long-term care, acute care. The systems are being much more integrated. There's partnering with a variety of different groups that are happening, and pay for performance is something that eventually will probably be the way that we're paid in the future. That forces you to be able to take a look at your organization and to see how efficient you run your organization, as well as what results do you get. The whole idea is no matter what setting you're in, you're decreasing harm for those individuals that are receiving services. This morning you heard about rehospitalizations. That whole emphasis was to decrease those rehospitalizations and to decrease the harm that's happening in the homes. We have something in the States that is called medical homes. And that's something that has become very popular, and that's actually delivering the services in someone's home, including physicians, nurse practitioners, et cetera. The person also, there's a lot of post-acute care models, and the bottom line is, do your residents get what's right for that individual at the right time, in the right place? And that's where you're going to have your most efficient use of resources. There's a decreasing number of silos being removed. And silos are those care options that's all they did. They had no partnerships with other forms of the continuums, and those are starting to break down. There's a need for massive amounts of coordination, whether you're coordinating with discharge planners from the acute care hospitals, whether you're working with continuing care retirement communities, assisted living, outpatient clinics. You have to begin to take a look at how you're going to manage and care manage and be able to coordinate. There is an elder population around the world. I have a fantastic job that I get to go all over the world, and guess what? There are a lot of countries that the aging population is the largest component of care that they're delivering. And so there's an emphasis now on improving that care for elders. Some of you look really young in this room, but some of you look more my age, in that you're starting to think about, well, what kind of care delivery is going to be there for me as I age? Transfers have to be more efficient. The days of waiting to take someone into your system, you have to have a smooth system of transitioning people through those levels of care. And decrease readmissions. You heard the keynote this morning. That's something that is on everyone's mind, whether you're an acute care hospital, whether you're a rehabilitation center, whether you're a nursing home. It doesn't make any difference. Those readmissions are the things that they give you a clue about your performance. What did you miss? What wasn't provided? Was the admission wrong? Should they not have even been in your portion of the continuum of care to begin with? So it questions, and you need to be taking a look at that. All of you should be aware of how many rehospitalizations you've had in the last week, in the last month. If you don't know that, then you need to get ahead of that curve. Integrated care leaders, there is a move in some countries to have one individual who follows that person, and so you'll see that in some of our public systems where there are more integrated care managers. And I think the thing that is interesting about long-term care, in many countries, it's the stepchild of acute care. And I think that you need to step up to the plate and say, I'm not the stepchild, but I'm one of the components of care that's critical for any individual to receive. And so you need to be able to talk about the difference that you make for your individuals that you serve. Some challenges that are happening are IT. Long-term care was not as sophisticated as some of the acute care models in terms of using technology and being able to take a look at their ability to have technology throughout both their day-to-day delivery of services as well as billing mechanisms, et cetera. So that's something. And then clinical oversight, the ability to have highly qualified, trained experts in a variety of different kinds of areas depending upon the residents that you take. I think that those that have been successful, we're finding in long-term care, have partnerships with a full continuum of care. They're seen as a valued partner. Some of those are financial arrangements, some are non-financial. And the world of post-acute, which long-term care falls into, is as important as the acute care continuum, and that people need to be able to move throughout those. The other side of this is the role of a physician. You heard a geriatrician speak this morning, but if you have a high caseload or are looking at developing specialized rehabilitation, physiatry is something that you need to take a look at, or neurology. Those needs need to be met by specialized physicians. Internal medicine and family practice is okay for some of the things, but when you get into specialized care, you need to be able to take a look at the role of the physician. So some interesting facts from our country, from nursing facilities versus inpatient rehabilitation facilities. Skilled is paid by day in our country, and the inpatient is paid by stay. The MDS is not inadequate to measure change and function over time. It isn't discrete enough, and so that's why FEM is a tool that's used by many who are doing rehabilitation in their nursing facilities. Now, there's a difference between rehabilitation and restorative or therapy services. So if you were a family member, and these are some of my family members, but if you were a family member, what should you ask? And I went to our providers, and they said, do you have your own therapist, or do you contract for therapy? And do those clinicians who are coming in, do they have competency with geriatrics? So whether it's contract or whether it's in-house, what is the competency? You have a geriatric population. So if you're contracting, do you ask that question? You need to be able to take a look at competency and expertise. Nursing hours per patient per day. In a rehab setting, it's 3.5 to 7 hours per day, and would depend upon the scope of what services that you're offering. So if you're saying that you have rehabilitation, you would expect to see a higher level of nursing care than if you are offering strictly a nursing facility. The smell test. For family members, that is something that when you go into an organization, if it smells like urine, that's not good. The other side that people said, and focus groups have told us, antiseptic doesn't smell good either. They want a clean smell. So, walk in and see what you think. These are from families. What does the rehab gym look like? If you're saying you have rehabilitation, is it parallel bars only, or is there proper equipment? Is it a rehab setting? So as you move through these things, you need to start to think about the setting itself, and for a family who's looking. You're going to have more sophisticated consumers coming in your organizations. The group how many of you have purchased something recently that you did not look at the web? That you didn't get some kind of rating, didn't get some kind of idea about what people thought about whatever you were going to purchase. And then what are your expectations for staff competencies? When you take a look at nursing, when you take a look at the physicians, when you take a look at the therapists, are you looking at their competencies as related to the populations you serve? So I'm an occupational therapist, and if I came to you and my experience has all been pediatrics, am I a good fit? So what kind of things would you expect me to have to show you that I'm competent and that I can offer the best therapy that I can to your residents? So those are something that you need to take a look at. The same for your nurses. If you're saying you're doing rehabilitation, where's the experience in rehab? That just doesn't happen overnight. A general acute care nurse does not have rehabilitation experience. And so you need to think about, where do we get that extra expertise that we may need to develop our programs? Okay, so let's take a look a little bit in the U.S. We've always had levels of care. We have always had nursing facilities, skilled nursing facilities. We have subacute rehabilitation that is offered in skilled nursing facilities. So we've had those levels of care. Most of it has been pushed by our funding systems, and so we've morphed from Medicare skilled to a variety of different levels. Rehab was added to what we call our Medicare skilled, and Medicare is our federal government, our payment system. It's attractive to have this because it's a higher payment than our state payment, which is called Medicaid, or if you're in California, Medi-Cal. And through this whole system of development, therapy was used and evolved and built up to where it actually came into rehabilitation businesses that support services in nursing homes. And so there's a variety of different things that have happened that when I sit in meetings up here, I hear some of those same discussions happening that we had a few years ago. Payment is a strong driver, as you well know. There is in a subacute rehabilitation program, which is a specific kind of rehabilitation program. The person goes from medical nursing to high-intensity rehab, usually 30 days, and then they may go back to a restorative model for an additional 20 days. That is an intensive rehabilitation program with in-house therapists, with rehab nurses, with rehab physicians. Therapy services is not rehabilitation. It's not a rehabilitation program. There's a difference there. And so you need to begin to take a look at that as well. I think the thing that you need to think about is how do we maximize results, but we don't take a look at overuse, underuse. All of those things are difficult. Restorative is done usually on an assistant level, but federal restrictions in our country require a registered nurse to establish the plan and sign off on the plan. So there does need to be that professional part. Providing as much therapy dependent upon need and if there is progress and if the person is benefiting. Very different than providing therapy for the sake of therapy. If it's not making a change, if there's not improvement, then that therapy should be stopped. So there's a point where you have an individualized plan, you have goals that you're working toward, and you're showing progress. That's what rehabilitation is. It is always individualized, always has a plan that's based on the need. So you need to go back and take a look at people who are receiving therapy and what you're calling rehabilitation. Are there individualized plans? How long are you taking a look at them? When are you looking at them? And if they're not making progress, what are you doing? Are you discharging them from that therapy service and rolling them over into restorative or activity programs? So understanding rehabilitation, it's not a PT with a gait belt. That is not rehabilitation. It's not an OT with a reacher. It's not a speech-language pathologist that can say padaka, padaka, padaka. That is not rehabilitation. Rehabilitation is a continuum of services that starts with emergency, goes all the way out into the home and the community and vocational services. Issues that are around the world in rehabilitation, payment. We are never going to get enough money for those of us who are in rehabilitation. We're never going to be happy with that. So you kind of have to get over with that. So you need to take a look at, are you efficient in providing those services, and are they effective? I think one of the biggest areas that hopefully we can offer some assistance to this province is the definition of a scope of what it is that each one of these things are. A scope statement allows us to really take a look at, this is what we say we do. And to do that, here are the human resources that we need. Here's the equipment, the supplies, the space, so that you're very clear and can be transparent, whether it's with the ministry, whether it's with a family coming to visit, whether it's someone who's coming to work. This is what we do. Here's the scope of our services. Now, the other side of this is that you are not as strong as I think you could be in this area for measurement. And what we define an outcome is the direct result of services. So all the things that you're doing, what difference does it make for that resident? That's the effectiveness. The other side of that coin is, are you efficient? Because you could be really effective and totally inefficient. You can be efficient and totally ineffective. You've got to marry those concepts. So if I achieve this result, how many resources did it take me to do that? That can be time, it can be number of hours, days, it can be people, it can be level of competencies of staff. What difference do those things make? Then access, do people get what they need when they need it? And then satisfaction or input. We really feel that those are 4 key domains that anyone providing services should be able to take a look at. Measurable progress. If people are in rehab, therapy, or restorative and they're not making progress, why are they there? Why are you providing those services? And it's an interdisciplinary team. So we don't use the word multi because multi usually means silos. Interdisciplinary means that everyone comes together, shows their expertise, and shares that expertise to create a result for that individual. We use the ICF. If you're not familiar with the International Classification of Function, it may help you define what we're terming rehabilitation. Your focus is going to be on the activity level and participation level. Activity is what that resident can do for themselves. Participation is their ability to play with their grandkids, to visit with their friends, to go play bridge, to be involved with activity. That's participation. There are two key components in this. You're going to look at your environment, and you're going to take a look at, does it need to be modified, as well as what's the personal preference of the person. So if you have a resident who's refusing to cooperate with rehab or therapy services, and they're continuing to be seen, their personal preference is that they're not going to do that, and if they're not participating, not making progress, how can you continue with that service? So you need to ask yourself those kinds of questions. There's a difference between an interdisciplinary rehabilitation program, a rehab service, a restorative program, and an activity program. All of them have different scopes. All of them have different results. So I want you to ask yourself these questions. If you have a rehabilitation program, and some of you raised your hand, what are your results? If you're a restorative program, what are the results that you're accomplishing? And if I'm a family member and I come to you and say, well, what have you done with residents that have been in that type of program? What could you tell me now? This is not your MDS or any of those sorts of things. It's talking about, here's the result. This person can either do more for themselves, they have less care given to them, they're more active, whatever, they have a better quality of life, and we've measured it. Same thing with activity, and the same, you have to have those approach. You can't look at just the level of how many PTs or OTs or restorative aides that you have. That's not telling you anything about your program. You have to be able to assess and understand the capabilities and commitments to provide quality rehab. And the only way you can do that is by talking about your results. So these are some things with scope. I think these are all on the, this is the one that's most important for you to be able to define who it is in this group. So that's something that these handouts will be available for you, but I think that this is important for you to consider. It should look different for whether you're delivering rehabilitation, therapy, restorative, or activities, and it should determine your admission, your continuing stay, and your discharge or transition criteria. You should use it for that. Your placement should always depend upon these. So if you have a variety of different services, you want to take a look at how are we making the decision of where they are most appropriate, and then assessments and reassessments are something that you need to be considering. And so those are things that you would take a look at. So there's more in this procedure, in this PowerPoint, but we are out of time, and so we'll move on to the next person. Thank you.
So hello, my name's Dale Moffett, as I said before, and what I want to do is talk a little bit about the current environment of restorative and nursing rehab in Ontario. This area is changing a lot. A special joint task force has been developed in Ontario to look at what's going on with the issues. Where do we go from here? What do we do in the immediate term? Midterm, and then what can we do in the long term to help Ontario with understanding and moving forward with nursing rehab and restorative care. So the Joint Task Force is a very short-term group of people that are coming together. Our mandate is to establish and identify and consider options and actions to identify a core standard for both physical rehab service levels appropriate to all residents in long-term care. And we want to make sure that the right groups are benefiting from a more specialized rehab process for physio and also responsive behaviors. We also want to look at data reporting issues related to the nursing rehab and special rehab coding for each service level and recommended appropriate changes. So wouldn't it be nice if we all did the same thing because we all had the same information? So this is one of the reasons for bringing this group together. And who sits at this table? Well, OLTCA and ONUS jointly, the Ministry of Health, CARF International, Chris is actually working with us. CIHI, we have the Inter-Rye researchers. We have representatives from long-term care homes, whether it's small independent, large corporations, RIE coordinators, to admins. We have a number of people that have expertise and information to help inform decisions so we can figure out where to move forward. So where are we now with restorative care and nursing? So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview. Some of this information you know, but I just want to tell you where we started from and where we're going. So we know that the MDS was implemented and the phase 1 was launched with 20 homes. And then we went to phase 2 all the way to phase 6 to 8. We began to implement different portions of the MDS. We learned together how to code. We learned together how to document RAPs. We learned together sort of to try and figure out the RUG system. We went from 8 indicators to 34 indicators, and not really understanding fully at the beginning what those RUGs meant. The purpose of RUGs is to look at where our residents, what kind of resource our resident requires, depending on clinical conditions, ADL levels, or medical conditions. It wasn't meant to be the funding pot. Yes, it does that. But when it was originally designed, the original design is this type of resident. So if mom has had a stroke and requires some physiotherapy, OT, where would she fall? So similar type of people would fall in the same group. There was calculations when it came to rehab. So rehab was new. When we first learned about MDS, a lot of us weren't doing rehab, or we thought we were doing rehab, but we weren't really doing rehab. And then there was coding, and we had to follow these rules, and the ministry came out with rules, and everybody tried to develop their own thing, unfortunately. So we know that we require RUG ADL scores, we need the rehabilitation score, and we need CPS scores, and that's what makes up those RUG categories. For the nursing, rehab, and restorative, we know that we have special rehab, impaired cognition, behavioral problems, and reduced physical functions. Those are the 4 categories that actually utilize the nursing, rehab, and restorative programs in your home. We struggled, and still are. I think everybody would agree that we're still struggling. Problems with data quality, misinterpretation of the coding. What does it mean? What does it not mean? Definitions. What is nursing rehab? What's restorative? What's therapy services? What's an activation? Who codes what under where? I don't know. We didn't understand it well enough as a sector. Some of the questions that have been submitted to CIHI when it comes to special rehab are, if I wash underneath a resident's armpit, is that restorative care? No. Restorative care is a program. It has goals. It must be goal-driven. There's some of these questions, and these are real questions that came into the ministry, and that's how confusing it was for people. So when we implemented and we started realizing about restorative care, there was funding. Our funding was going to be attached to this. Then all of a sudden, homes in Ontario spiked all the way. So this is the number of homes, and that means over here that 98, 94, 95% of your residents are receiving physiotherapy services in your home, according to the definition, which is 3 times a week, 45 minutes, 15 minutes a session. And that should be, if it's happening that week, it should be happening every week. And this was a real spike. Unlike anything the researchers had seen in any of the other provinces in North America or other countries. So it gained the attention. Are we doing it right? Are we not doing it right? Why is this happening? What's going on? So when we looked at it, we found as time went on, the residents in that special rehab category kept going up. So in 2010, there was 20.9% of our resident population in Ontario in that special rehab category. But prior to that, Saskatchewan's 0.8. They're all using the MDS. So why is Ontario so different? So that was the question to the ministry, to the associations, to the homes, to the researchers. What's going on? This slide has been provided by Dr. John Hurdes, has done a lot of research and looked at the analytical data. What this slide identifies is the ADL categories. So one of the things with restorative and nursing rehab is you must show outcomes. And how do you show outcomes with, and how did your resident improve, not improve? How did they stay in a program? So they took all the data, and what they did was, this is 2009 to 2010, and this is residents, okay, that they had in that special rehab, nursing rehab group, these are the residents' scores, ADL scores, for transferring at 0 days. That means there's 0 nursing rehab days. So this is 7 nursing rehab days. So this resident over here has 0 days, and this resident over here has had 7 days. And this is the percent improvement. Do you see a lot of difference? So one of the things that we need to look at is, what is our program doing? If I'm receiving 3 days, 7 days, and I should be improving. My residents should be improving. But this is what the data was showing. These are the other ones, transferring, eating, and bed mobility. Your 3 main for BET, but you can see a trend here. Right? You should be dramatic. It should be a straight line going up. So there's a problem with the data. So people became concerned. Homes became concerned. The ministry did targeted DART audits on homes, specifically for restorative care. And the reason they did that was because what's going on, we need to find out. So they specifically went out and did a number of homes. But what happened is they were finding that the criteria was not being done correctly for P3 to meet the guidelines for coding. So restorative care may not have been under nursing. Nursing may not have been signing off. There was actually no evidence of a care plan. There was a plan and care in place, but the goals were so vague they weren't measurable. There was no log or record that nursing rehab or restorative was happening. So these were concerns. There was no evaluation by a nurse. So these are some of the things that were being identified. So what do we do about it? So, and what are the possible explanations? Well, yeah, the funding model might have had a little bit of push to that rehab category because you get more money to be in that special rehab category. There may have been real practice changes. There are many homes in this province that implement a restorative and nursing rehab program and changed their practice on how they delivered care. Absolutely. Training and education, maybe people didn't quite understand the right definitions or what the requirements were for the coding. So these are possible things that went on. So the Ministry of Health wanted to help the sector, and they provided education on nursing rehab. They provided the job aids. I'm sure everybody's heard of the job aids. Anybody not heard of job aids by the ministry? No? Okay. So there was a lot of education. And the fact that not all the homes in the province, we found this out the other day as well, so you're not the only one. If they don't know about some of these materials, what are we doing that we're not communicating and getting the messaging out? So another reason for this task force to come together. And let's figure it out together. The inspection protocol was released, the IP, and the ministry went in and did their focused audits other than what the DART team did. And unfortunately, I can say this in confidence, that at that time, not one home passed the audit. for different reasons. They weren't all the same reasons. Some homes were like shocked. What do you mean? You put this beautiful program in place. What do you mean we're not doing it right? So once again, messaging. So the regs do state that we do have to have an interdisciplinary restorative care philosophy that promotes and maximizes. So we're doing the program, and we want to do the program. And the purpose of the program is to help our resident improve their abilities and their ADLs. It's resident specific, improved outcomes for residents, a better sense of self. One of the homes did a full restorative program, measured it, and as a result, they found the ISE scores. So for those of you who don't know the lingo, ISE is your Index of Social Engagement. By improving their restorative activities, getting them out, they actually improved the amount of time, and they went to activities more often and started increasing their socialization. That's a positive. This is an example of a home who implemented a restorative program in 2009, and this is they were coding wrong. I'm going to tell you clearly, they were miscoding. Because we actually went in when our organization realized what's going on. Like, we're realizing about this program, they've got all these rules, and we found out everybody was coding. We're like, oh my God, we're not trained, we don't have a program, how are we doing this? And we literally said, stop coding. They weren't happy, I'll tell you, because this is what happened from stopping coding. But we improved our coding because a program was implemented, and then you could see the gradual change. And this is real resident improvement. Worsen quality indicators. You can see the steady decline in late loss. There's an up and down blip, but once again, you can see improvement. So do restorative and rehab programs, do they show outcomes? Yes. I think one of the concerns is we don't understand how to get to the outcomes. Homes are struggling with a resource. Who's going to read all this data? How am I going to pull all this data, and what does it mean? And what piece do I put here, and what piece do I put there to get a nice, pretty little graph like that? Because I'm a single home, 100 beds, and I don't have the resource to do that. So these are just some of the outcomes that you can see from a program, and this is from the implementation of a nursing rehab and restorative program, and the percent improvement. So you know what? We're doing it right, but we're not. So let's get on the same page. So future direction with the long-term care task force, what we're going to do is we're going to create we've got this group created. We've got a very short window of time, March 1st, 2013. That's a short window of time. So this group met yesterday, so I'm doing a follow-up from yesterday's meeting. It was excellent. I have to say that everybody was on the same page. Everybody wants to improve what we're doing. We want to provide long-term care in Ontario, the tools, the resources, and what are you supposed to do? So everybody has the same information. So what are our next steps of the Joint Task Force? Education for the sector. We know AIS. Better coding, understanding some of the outcomes, utilizing the AIS. Everybody now has access. That's excellent. Before, there were certain homes that only had access and the ability to have that. Everybody has this extremely valuable resource. It's excellent. It's being implemented across the province through the ministry. We've been using it for 3 years now. It is absolutely invaluable to help your staff and understand where you need more education. How to use the data. So education for how to use that data. What to look at. Using the MDS outcomes and quality indicators to inform decisions. Well, first of all, if you don't know what the quality indicators are, then we've got to start there and have different levels for different groups. Establishing a scope. So following in line with CARF and utilizing some of CARF resources, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. Chris has been around the world to see these programs. She's seen what works and what doesn't work. So Chris has very kindly volunteered to sit on our working group to come up with this scope for Ontario as a team. Auditing homes, the ministry will continue to audit homes that are outliers. We haven't done haven't done anything punitive. They don't want to do anything punitive in the past. We have to figure out, use the research, use the data to find out what is the problem first, and then move forward. But you can guarantee that if you're an outlier, you'll probably get audited, and you need to know that. There's many companies out there that actually say in their flyers and their advertising, we will maximize your CMI. Well, what about providing the best care for my resident? If I provide the best care for my resident and deal with the resident as an individual, your CMIs will improve because you're improving their outcomes. So be careful when you go to maximize your CMI, you clinically must be looking at that resident. So that's where we're going. It's a very quick time frame. I'm excited to be part of this group because I really see a joint effort to help everyone, whether you're a big company or a small organization. So thank you very much. And I think we're on time. Right on time. Excellent. So it's 11:30. We have half an hour or so for questions. So if you do have a question, you can put your hand up and we'll direct it to whoever at the panel. Any questions? You had one earlier.
Yeah, she answered it later on.
See? So smart. Any other questions? Burning questions? Yes.
My question is for Leslie. In your presentation, you mentioned that exercise is more beneficial in long-term care homes. Can you expand on that?
Oh, that was from the systematic review, where it looked at the 4,915 residents in 47 different programs, and it was all related to frailty, right? They all had to be frail. And what they were looking at, they had hospital settings in there, and they also had like in-home programming, and the long-term care ones were more successful. Yeah. Well, they thought it was because of staff support, but they didn't. It was more of a summary, right? Yeah. But I have the. It's at the back. That article. Yeah. Is it for still me?
In the gray? Yes.
Yes, this is just to add on. I think while you were presenting, I was thinking about why it would be more successful. Long-term care homes are set up to be successful. You've got your flat surfaces, you've got your equipment, you've got wide doorways and, bright hallways, where in the community you might be working in somebody's home with stairs and poor lighting, distractions that would take away from their better outcomes. That's why I think.
Thanks.
Another question up front? Blue? And then.
So I understand we're focusing a lot on improvement and goals, but what happens when somebody's achieved their maximum goal and they're on a plateau? There's no room for improvement. Are you supposed to just switch them at that point, or to keep them?
You can discharge it because it's a chart. Looking at maintenance, first of all, if you discharge from the program, you should also have it supporting activities in their care plan, such as activation. They could be following other programs to make sure that they maintain their abilities. If you see they're sliding off, you either don't have the supports down here, or they need more of a maintenance type program. I know there's different people, different organizations, different companies, different definitions that you cannot have a maintenance program and be a restorative person, and which is one of the concerns about what is the definition, what is the scope. Okay, so if a resident declines and they benefit from a full restorative program 7 days a week, that's one thing. But if you just maintain somebody forever and ever and ever, then they should be off the program. If they don't, they have to have a goal.
So I'm talking about people who have improved and
Yep.
they've reached that. So we're trying to develop a discharge policy, and it's kind of difficult.
Discharge criteria.
Yeah. So if they met the previous goal, and now we're just maintaining that, can they still be officially enrolled in the program?
yourself if you thought of transition. If you thought of, I think when you hear the word discharge, you kind of think nothing. I mean, that it's done. But what you're actually doing in long-term care, you're transitioning people through different kinds of services that you offer. So you have them in a restorative program with an individualized plan. That individualized plan had an outcome that you were looking for, a result. They achieved that. They've maintained that. Transition them into your activity program where they're using all those skills. They're completed with that program. You can show that result, and you have a summary of what happened. But you transition them into another service that you offer, which is activity, which then you might have the goal of quality of life, increased participation, all the things that you could do there. But I think discharge for some people is a term that they think it's over, it's done, there's nothing else we're doing, but really what you're doing is transitioning people. So you may transition, you may have a very specialized rehabilitation program that you transition then into restorative, into activity. So I think transition might help you think of that a little bit more.
Okay. You're next.
My question is for Chris.
Hi.
Hi. You mentioned that the MDS data is not detailed enough.
Sensitive enough over time.
Do you have any suggestions on what other data we can use? Because we have been relying on MDS.
Well, in the U.S., people use the FEM as well, but they're rehabilitation programs. They're not restorative, they're rehabilitation. And there's a uniqueness to rehabilitation versus restorative. And so those that are in our world, we have a lot of people who are doing rehabilitation, just like you would in a hospital-based program, but it's actually located, because it's either who ends up in those kind of programs in the States are total hips, total knees, people who may have had a simple stroke with no comorbidities. They may have lost a limb due to diabetes, but they don't have other comorbidities. So they're actually going into nursing facilities for what's called subacute rehabilitation. Those are the organizations that are actually using FEM as well as the NDS because they need to have a more sensitive kind of tool.
You're next, and then you go.
Yeah.
This is in relation to what she asked a while ago. I come from a nursing home of 34-bed capacity, and say for example we have 7 people on some restorative program, and then after a quarter we discharge them from the program because they improved. But after another quarter, even with the activities that they have, they decline again. So would it be possible for us to put them back in the program?
I guess I would ask if, I'm hoping that your structure is that if someone has achieved a certain level in a restorative program, that there's a coordinated effort that your activity program is through activity offering some of the things that may support what was done in the restorative part, and that you can maintain some. If they're not being maintained, you have to do a full assessment to see, is it a medical issue, is it a cognitive issue, is it just our follow-through is not what it should be, are we not supporting the person in their activities of daily living so that they can do more with themselves. I mean, I think that instead of saying, okay, this quarter they did this, and then they drop back down, and then we're going to start it back up, there has to be some reasoning, and you have to do a thorough review of what your organization is doing to see if it's supporting those people who have either graduated or transitioned out of restorative into an activity program.
Thank you.
This, and then the gentleman back.
My question is for you, Gail. You mentioned that the task force has a deadline of March 1st. Is this for an action plan that we're going to put forward?
Yes. So we have a March 1st deadline. We'd like to for some immediate issues.
Okay.
That's not going to be the long-term stuff.
Okay.
We're not saying that we're not going to continue on and work on mid and long-term issues, but we want to look at what can we do now to help the situation in Ontario, because there's too many variables right now, too many inconsistencies. The research shows it, and you don't have to be a statistician to figure it out. Really, you can see it. You can see the big jump in the special drugs rehab group, and we know from how the funding model went this year that we're not sure what to do. We need to move forward. We need to figure it out, and that's why this group is coming, so we can put forth recommendations to the ministry from an expert panel. Yes?
Actually, my question is along the same line of what the task force is doing, and maybe if you'd like to shed a little bit more light on it. Are they actually creating like standardized tools for everybody to use, or it's just guidelines for us to actually put on the tools?
So this was discussed. I'll tell you it was discussed because one of the things was, can we provide everybody the same tool for everybody? This is our assessment. This is our evaluation. And so everybody has the same information. It doesn't matter who you are. That is one of the things that's in discussion. The scope, everybody understanding the same definition. So it could be the same criteria to get into that special rehab rug grouper. Okay, so we've got some clinical experts, we've got some research to back up some decision making and really look at what that scope is. Who gets into nursing rehab? Who gets into special rehab? Who is the population? What do they look like? So we're really trying to give it to the sector so we're all on the same page. Because we even had a little discussion. Those homes that have been audited, they know more information than the homes that haven't been audited. Because it was an interesting conversation because there was a representative from some of the homes that were audited, and they said, well, we thought we were doing it right. So now we've changed this, this, and this. Then other homes that haven't been audited, but we have the same type of process, are we doing it wrong too? So there was a lot of that discussion to see if we could standardize it. Yes?
Can you say about 5% residents supposed to be in special rehab?
Okay, am I going to explain the funding system and how the decision came up? No. I am not walking into that, Wolfden, but what I will say is, looking at the numbers, everybody concedes something's wrong. Like, I can't think of one person in long-term care that would say that it's working the way it was supposed to be working. There was a team of long-term care people, the ministry, finance people, and they were put together, and they said, figure out a way to get the funding to work, or the best worst case scenario. And they were given many case scenarios. They worked on it. This is what they came up with. I don't know. I wasn't sitting at that table, but I do know that they all worked together. They worked diligently through many different scenarios, and they had to do something. Am I happy about it? Not really. But this is what we've got. And this is why this task force, we're starting now instead of December, right? You don't want us to start next December to try and figure out for next funding year, right? So that's why we're starting now. Can we get some information out to you so everybody's on the same page and it's a level playing field? Because we should be funded based on what does our resident population look like? Who is it that we are taking care of? What services are we providing? What medical conditions, etc. And we should be funded based on that. And that's what the RUG system was meant to do. There's a lot of research out there that shows that. But we have to figure out why we have anomalies in our system. Does that help?
Yes.
Did I answer, but not really? Yes?
Can I just make like an observation? I'm listening here. I think you've identified it. I think that it goes back to it's all interpretation of all terminology. So going to the scope and then starting, because I've been listening to questions, I know we're all confused sometimes, even what restorative rehab is. And my own facility, we have round the table discussions, and we'll go around the table and everyone will have their own interpretation.
Absolutely.
So, that if we could just clear that up to start,
So that's exactly what we're doing. Like, we're talking within the next 10 days. Sooner than that. Sooner than that. And all these committee members are volunteers to sit on this short, small working group to help come to a definition and scope. And scope it out using the best information from around the world.
So will that, like, when you get this information available, I'm going back to my facility after do I tell them to look for it somewhere, or are you communicating to it?
There'll be communication.
Okay,
This is a joint effort. So there's both associations, the Ministry of Health, like we're all in it together. We want to make it work together. This isn't a he said, she said, anything like that. This is, let's move forward, let's make it work, but let's, obviously, long-term care doesn't get it yet. And maybe we didn't communicate it well. So let's figure out what we need to do, start with the scope, because the definition is very vague in the regs. And let's move forward and provide information and some real concrete stuff for our homes. No matter what size you are, how big you are, how many resources you have, let's get it to you.
And what I would recommend that the PowerPoints are up on the website, I believe, and go and look at those two levels of scope and just start your discussions and thinking about what would you put in there? What would you say are the kinds of individuals that you have in your home? And I think that's a good exercise for you if you said you have round tables. I'd sit around and have people say, hey, let's talk about this. Who is it? And the key to that is not just putting diagnosis or age. The key to that is if we say we can do this, if we can handle this person, then what resources do we need? What expertise, what competencies, what skills, what materials, what equipment, what space? Because you can write a great scope statement, but if you don't have the resources to support it, you won't be able to accomplish the results. And basically what you're trying to do is always take a look at what difference do I make in the life of that person who is in my home. Whether it be rehabilitation, restorative activity, or maintenance, what is it?
Any other questions? Well, once again, I thank you for joining us. I thank for the speakers and Christy Gardner.